All right, so the Manchus. So the Manchus come after the Ming dynasty in China. The Ming, pretty much by the 1600s, were pretty weak, were corrupt. So the Manchus were able to overthrow them. So Manchus come to power in 1644. They are a minority group that's ruling a majority. So they, it's not like a typical setup, right? Because usually you have like majority ruling minority. But in this case, this is minority group ruling majority. So they kept like the highest positions in power for Manchus only, because obviously like they were concerned that if they let the majority of like the Chinese come to power, that they would take power back from them. So they keep the highest positions just for the Manchus. They're incredibly centralized and bureaucratic. They use the Confucian systems, right? The mandate of heaven, the civil service system, extremely bureaucratic. Remember, bureaucracy, like quick reminder of bureaucracy. Think of like a dresser, right? With like drawers. You have different departments for each part of society, right? So you've got a department that's in charge of, defense and education and taxes and agriculture and everything, like just like we have now, like with a cabinet. This is bureaucracy, right? Just think of that like a bureau, a dresser. So at the same time, because of the Colombian exchange, there's tons of new foods coming into China. So the population is increasing a ton. And so the Manchus are profiting off of that. And from the silver trade. So they're doing pretty well. All right, Mughals, moving over to India. Mughal literally is Persian for Mongol. Okay, so they were Turks that were of Mongol descent and took lands in India. So they come to power really through this like military elite, firepower. So just like, we were talking about, how does someone come to power? Well, if they've got weapons and they've got strength, they're building fear, they're going to overthrow me. They're going to kill me in this society. So, okay, you're in charge, So the rulers were different religion than the ruled, right? So the Mughals are Muslim and the most of India is Hindu. So you do have this balance, just like the Manchus, right? You have this difference where you have a difference in the religion of who is in charge and the religion of who they're ruling over. One person to know from the Mughals would be Akbar. He was really religiously tolerant, so he like removed the taxes that were put on non-Muslims. He removed those, and then also created a lot of new revenues. So was incredibly wealthy and made a lot of money for the Mughals. Basically, the Zamindars were there before, were kind of this in-between in collecting taxes, and so he bypassed them, right? So they're this like noble group. So instead of having to rely on them in collecting taxes to then pay to the government, which, by the way, they didn't do all the time, they weren't very good at, they would take some of the money. So forget them. I'm just going to collect the taxes straight from the people. And so by doing that, he really like legitimized his power and kind of removed that threat of this like noble society. Ottomans. So the Ottoman Empire extends a really long time. It doesn't end until World War I. So it's going to go straight through period 5 and into period 6. But it's in this time period, in period 4, that it begins. So after the Mongols conquer the Seljuks, who are Egyptian, it kind of clears the way. So now you don't have to deal with the Seljuks anymore. After the Mongols kind of lose their power too, it kind of opens the door. So the Ottomans come marching through. Constantinople falls in 1453. I've said this before, you don't need to know dates. You can get a 5 on AP World without remembering any date. But there are some dates that are worth knowing. 1453 is one. It's pretty much like, why does this time period start in 1450? This is like a massive turning point right here. So their empire was just like was about constant expansion, right? The more they expanded, the more money they made, the more land they had to feed their horses, to contribute to their food surplus and everything. So all about expansion. They just kind of continued expanding. This map is 1801, so you can see by the end of this time period how much they expanded. One important term to know from them is the Devshirme. Anyone know how to pronounce that? This is one of those like AP World terms that I'm always like, how do you say that one? The conquered Christians that they conquered in this region had to essentially send their young boys to become part of the troops, the Ottoman troops. So they would like kind of give them up. And those boys would now be dependent on the state. And a lot of them then became these Janissaries, this like elite, loyal warriors that were incredibly connected, right? They're empowered. They're not going to go anywhere. They're going to fight for the state. This is what they do. Basically, from this time period, Ottomans, just remember expansion, and that Devshirme and Janissaries, those terms come up too. I've seen multiple choice questions that relate back to that. Okay, Russia. Once they become free from the Mongols, once the Mongols are sort of out of the picture, the Russians are going to expand dramatically. I mean, dramatic. Like, look at how much land they have. The Russians are also going to really like push for reforms and westernizing, and so that they, can kind of catch up with the rest of the world. All right, so a couple people to remember from this empire would be Ivan III. This is Ivan the Great. There's also an Ivan the Terrible in this time period. Ivan III is the one that kind of deemed Moscow as Third Rome. He married an heir to the Byzantine Empire, and in doing so was like, look, now we're connected to this Roman lineage. And so it's a continuity of imperial Rome into Russia. So that's an important point. Peter the Great is also a really interesting figure, really important to know. And I got to add some more points under him, but basically he drafts the peasants. He is westernizing it. He traveled quite a bit around Europe, and when he comes back, he's like, we got some work to do. We got to do things like them. I know, just to like give Freemanpedia another shout out, I know he's doing a bunch of stuff on his website about Russia. So if you want more content of just about Russia to kind of just understand their whole timeline, there's a lot of good stuff on that site.